Alright, there we go. First candidate is Alex from we There we go. That should be a bit better now. It should actually sound decent. Apologies for the bit of issue right there. So the first question towards our candidates is, if you are elected, if you do gain majority, what would be your first week in office? Let's start with the Labour representative. I believe he is typing, so we'll give him time. Alright, while he's typing that up, I believe Form UK, you're able to use your mic, yeah? Do you want to... oh, there we go, he's 10 of it. There's echo and it should... there we go. That should be a bit better. Alright, that should be better now. What sectors would you be providing stability in, if you don't mind me asking? All right, thank you. All right, thank you. Let's move on to Reform UK. Are you there? Yeah. So, same question towards you. What would your first week in office look like?
Which will be along the lines of our manifesto and what everybody, what we've found out needs to happen within that first week.
Well, all right, and what would be your goal for agencies in that first week, if you can elaborate on that?
Being realistic, there is not a lot you're going to get done with agencies in the first week. Whilst I Reform UK believe organisation is a massive issue within this group. Working with services to identify and correct organisation and structural issues within the services will bring greater transparency, make them the people trust services more, make them more efficient, effective, and overall just be able to perform their job and duties. Because at the minute, whilst yes, the Met are active and they do their best, more transparency and more control will be useful and make them a more reliable force for the British public.
All right, thank you. Next up, we'll head to independent DJ add-on. Obviously, I believe you're just running for Parliament, if that's correct.
That's correct, Loki. Can you hear me right?
Yep, you're coming through fine. What would
Alright, great.
What would your first week in Parliament look like?
Well, my first week in Parliament would obviously look like reviewing all our current legislation and see what's currently needed. As of the past 2 weeks, I've been introducing new legislation, such as the recent Best Transport for London bill, which was supposed to be by the BBB, but I just introduced it in their place. Following that, I introduced the fixed penalty bill. I'm still going to look into amending the Rest Times Act. Following that, we're going to have a look into all forms of legislation that we currently have and still need. I've also been asked to hold to be the nomination or asked to join a party. I'm not planning to join a party. I'm not joining to join a party. That's because I like to keep my independent status. But I've also been asked to hold an office. I've been asked by multiple parties to be their foreign secretary, which so far I have declined. Right now,
what's the reason you've declined the offer? I take it's been from multiple parties, or is it one party?
Well, I've been so far asked by, I believe, 2 or 3 parties to be their foreign secretary candidate. For the moment, I've decided to stay as independent, and I'll see if I'm needed. But so far, I've been taking office elsewhere. I've just recently, as you might know, left the position of ambassador of the Foreign Office. In that same week, we got kicked out of the United Nations. But overall, I'm looking forward to some fresh starts. And while if I'm needed, I'll consider to offer to become a foreign secretary if I'm needed, of course, or an ambassador. But I'm not going to step in like that because I'd just like to explore new avenues.
All right. And last but not least, Better Britain Party. I believe you guys are running for Parliament, and the majority of your candidates are going for Northern Irish constituencies. So, obviously, what would your first week in Parliament look like? If you just bear with us while she just finishes typing. All right. So, coming up next, our next question is going to be obviously, we've discussed your first week in office. The main thing currently is the previous governments have not lasted too long due to civil unrest. Obviously, there was the protest earlier in the week outside 10 Downing Street before the monarch announced his the dissol the the dissol oh my god the basic before
I
the
believe you're looking for the word
Dissolution.
dissolution.
involvement of public.
There we go. Before the dissolution of Parliament, how how do you guys feel? Do you feel like how are you going to stay in the office? How are you going to keep and repair that public trust that has been damaged by the past administrations? If we can go to Morgan first, how do you plan to fix the trust?
By being transparent and actually sticking with my promises. If we look at the previous governments, rarely have they actually delivered on what they said they were going to. Rarely have they actually spoke to the British people after the elections. I cannot remember the last proper Prime Minister's questions we had, any media interviews or anything. None of the previous governments have hardly listened to their people.
And as you're saying, how do we? Oh, go on in, Shay. We, I believe Labour is looking to challenge that statement right now. Are you wish? Oh, there we go. We've got Bear Bren.
Is that ITV who completely missed every single major event of the last week?
Alex, if you want to interject. This is a debate after all. You guys can challenge each other's points if needed. So if I pose the same question to you, Alex, how do you plan to repair the trust that has been destroyed by previous governments? I'll also open it to the floor for debate as well. Are you able to elaborate at all, Alex? Anything? Indeed is. Yeah, you can just jump in. You don't need to ask permission to jump in. Feel free to come in and challenge. If you have a mic, it is preferred to use that. Excellent question from DJ there.
Party who have actually served within the armed forces. if you don't control him, how come everything he did you told him to, or you were the instigator of? All of the changes within the regiments, which I was there as the Chief of Naval Staff at the time, everything which he tried to do, you overruled and said that your ideas were better. He did dismiss your idea, however, your idea was the one that ended up happening. What does that tell you about you not micromanaging the armed forces? And to answer that person in the crowd's question, there was a sec death. Or, I don't know, Tesco's were a bit advanced for a...
Alright, so moving on, next up. Obviously, there's been a lot of governments that we've had that have elected ministers who have obviously been active for a couple of days and then mysteriously drop off the face of the earth as if they've got nothing. So the question I pose to you is, do you have candidates for government that will actually be active and help out their department? It's open to the floor.
Yes, Reform and White Rose have actually formed a coalition to ensure we have the most active people and the most people possible to have a functioning government. It does not work if there's one or two of you in the government, as you don't have a majority. It's not fair. There's no democracy. It just doesn't work. It's basically a dictatorship.
Yep, go right ahead.
Perfect Roblox.
Roblox. This is why we tend to do these over microphone.
Alex, if you DM it me, I can read it out for you if you want.
We'll come back to you, Alex. I think you're having a bit of issue with the filter right now. So one of the... Yeah, you can do it. Oh, so obviously the next one I'll talk about, obviously this is the largest amount of seats we've had in the DUK Parliament in a long time. Obviously there's some members that are running for the same constituency. Why should people vote for members of your party? What can you bring that will make you stand out? Or in DJ's case, what makes you stand out? Question is open to the floor.
Reform bring consistency, transparency, and competency, which are the three things you need to have a strong and stable government, which we have not had in the past.
If I may be so blunt to say, in the previous election I had a 100% approval rate. I mean, I'm not expecting the same right now because we got a lot of parties, of course, and I can understand that some people might say, okay, you're the founder. Like, considering the amount of people we got about, I believe, approximately 30 signups right now for Parliament. that people might consider, okay, you're the founder, please step aside for all these other members of parliament. But what I can see is like, all right, I'm an independent, and as such, I'll try to act as an independent in parliament. My job will be mostly to, well, keep the other parties in check, of course, but likewise, I'll need the help of said parties to get things done in parliament. So my job will, of course, be like, well, both supporting and criticizing the parties surrounding with me.
All right. If there's any other interjections, I guess we can move on along to our next one. Let me just grab up in my document here. Obviously, oh, yep, let me just grab that point for the White Rose Party. So the White Rose Party wanted to form a coalition with Labour, and they, does it not concern reform, they want a glimpse of power. Also, White Rose didn't want government, so they don't have candidates who want to serve in power. Is there any challenge to Labour's point that I've just read out?
Well, I think that's ridiculous. This whole thing is about forming a government. And the only way White Rose or Reform would be able to see a majority in the government and actually help the British people is forming a Reform. White Rose co-allying with Reform was on the cards. However, they changed their mind. They saw your policies and they decided that's not something we can back. Therefore, Reform, they saw our policies and they thought, oh, we can back them. We will join Reform and help them form a government.
All right. So one main thing. Oh. Okay, just let it.
Well, then there's no challenge, as they obviously wouldn't form a coalition if they don't know what you're about.
Well, that's kind of indeed true because of the current situation with constituency seats. It's like you'll need to form a coalition with others to get a majority in parliament, except for, yeah, also too for Labour, because Labour might have the most seats right now, but they also need to consider, like, you need to get a majority in the government, meaning some of you guys might have to work together with others. In my case, I might have one seat, but Labour, for example, might have 13, or Morecambe Hare might have, I don't remember the height of math, but I believe you guys got 3, 4.
Reform do, however, with White Rose we've got 10.
Ah, right. Then perhaps it's simply for the Reform Party a good idea to get their people to sign up. Especially now considering, well, it's been early, so basically you now got technically 1 day.
Oh, do we?
All right, moving on. Next question. We're going into the interesting ones now. So one of the main things that's been at the front of the line is the MPS and London Ambulance Service. Obviously, both are under the Home Office. Currently, the London Ambulance Service has no CEO. What are your plans to help improve the healthcare within?
May I
the UK?
start with this one?
Of course, go ahead.
I'm not sure if anybody's aware, however, I am actually the Surgeon General to the King. So the ambulance service is quite a major point for me. I have several CEO candidates who will all be vetted with both leadership and medical knowledge. I will ensure my government generates proper procedures such as the Healthcare Practitioners Council, which is responsible for managing the qualifications, skills, training, everything about healthcare professionals, which is going to be your paramedics, midwives, etc. So Reform, we fully back the ambulance service. We will try and secure them as much funding as possible. we will ensure they have adequate facilities for training and legislation to actually back and protect them.
All right. Any other points against that anyone would like to raise?
I suppose I'll introduce, with the support of our lovely development team, a bill for the London Ambulance Service Helicopter Service, or whatever it's going to be called. Probably the Morgan, if I'm correct, the London Ambulance Trustee Fund or something like that. That's helicopters fall under. You probably know better.
Sorry, it's London's Air Ambulance. It's a charity.
Yes, thank you. But basically, I'll have Luke with development team to establish that as an independent.
Right, I believe. Anything else from Labour or Reform that they'd like to add before we move on?
No. Actually, yeah, I'd like to ask British Better Britain Party, which is a strange name for a Northern Ireland focused group, considering Northern Ireland's part of the United Kingdom. However, it is not part of Great Britain. Better Britain Party, with the London Ambulance Service, do you have any links to it, or do any of your party have any history within healthcare? The whole point is to run for Parliament here. That's kind of what you do as a political party. Well, that's fair enough. It was just out of curiosity, wasn't.
Mr. Apollo, if I may put out a point of order.
Yep.
What are the other parties going to do about immigration?
We have several advisors, such as previous people who've worked in the FCDO, who have experience dealing with immigration and have had successful policies in the past. We will also be working with the security services to actually ensure that British citizens only do not come from any terrorist or how do I put this? Countries which we are at war with or would deem a threat to national security. The border is incredibly important that we protect, as that is essentially the walls around our country.
So Labour obviously saying there that they are looking into potentially opening border force if they get into power. How can you make sure that opening border force don't take away manpower from other agencies which are already very heavily stretched out, such as MPS?
How would border force work with it being a Roblox group? Would you introduce how would it work? Because obviously we have citizens and non-citizens able to join the game, otherwise the game wouldn't work. So what would Border Force actually be enforcing?
Likewise, do we even have a border force? By that logic, we might as well get the British Transport Police.
That's pushing it a bit, DJ.
Yeah, no, but you get what I mean. Like, the border force will practically be useless.
Well, BTP
considering...
are actually more useful since Border Force are only warranted immigration. National Crime Agency hold a Border Force warrant, actually.
I mean, I could agree, but at the same time, there's no border in central London, so
That is true.
what
We don't
what will be
actually
the
have a
point?
border to police.
Right, if everyone's ready, I think we can move on to the next topic. We're getting a bit off the question here. So, the justice system. For a long time, the justice system has been, to put it simply, completely failed within the group. If you were to be elected or in DG's case, become an MP, how would you help ensure that we have a fair justice system for all?
Reform would work with logging and actually enforcing crimes, because at the minute you join the game, you commit a crime, you get arrested, you get released, you go and blow the same person up again. There's no punishment. There's no justice system. However, we would ensure that there is a logging system behind it. So you commit a crime, the police have to gather evidence for that crime, which would increase the role play for them and make it more enjoyable. Once they have that, we would then introduce the Crown Prosecution Service, which MPS would have to present the evidence to and progress with charges. Then if you get charged, that goes on your record for so long. We have a Justice Secretary from White Rose.
If I may ask the Reform Party, how are you going to monitor and look at charges, etc.?
So the Met Police already log all of their arrests. The charges would be logged through the Crown Prosecution Service. Simply, all they do after the suspect has been through magistrates or any courts, it just gets put onto a logging system, which then we have access to, similar to a DBS. However, so that we would also work on making a system so it's easily so you can search through it to find people. So we would develop a website where you can search usernames to find them, so it's more efficient, and public services and the armed forces, so people who are in trust, we can check their backgrounds and ensure that we can actually trust them and they aren't terrorists.
Right. Well, that's a nice idea and all, but what about? Well, obviously we got roleplay scenarios like people will often commit crimes, etc. Like, where's the boundary where we're going through a court case for speeding or a court case for massive bombings, etc.?
Well, there's already a difference between the two. I think you don't really understand how the court system works. Speeding is normally a civil offence dealt with by a traffic offence report or a fixed penalty notice of the such, whereas bombing would be dealt with in a Crown Court, as that is terrorism, which are two incredibly different things. You also wouldn't get any... Speeding wouldn't go on any record, really, as it's not that serious of a crime. There's only certain crimes which would record. Also, due to roleplay, we would clear them after so long.
Alright.
Right, Labour, if you want to give your side, that's going to be the last one we're going to take on this questioning, just so that we keep moving along.
How does that differ from reform, though? Because ours is also about a court system. How does that differ from you slating BBP's policies on border force, though? Because you were saying to them earlier that there was a lack of workforce, essentially, and we were already struggling. So by opening a court system, which I do agree would be a good idea when we can staff it, and that is similar to reform with the Crown prosecution, and actually we were on about a court system. I was just wondering how you were going to go about staffing it. Would you have it as part-time? Or wouldn't that make the judges then biased? That's very true. That is.
All right. Real good debates going on. Up next, we have the one that everyone loves to talk about. Your foreign policies. So, we'll start with, we'll start with reform to give Labour time to type up their response. How do you plan to strengthen diplomatic relationships with other nations? Obviously, in the government before last, we had a lot of foreign visits going on, a lot of activity for help to get MPS active. How do you plan to do that if you get elected?
If you elect reform, we will host several foreign visits, as well as look at the cultural side of things. With events like motorsport and sport, we would open that to foreign nations and allow them to actually compete in events run by us. That would not only strengthen our relations between countries, but allow for more engagement and activities. We don't have to be in a UN to host countries, to host visits. Most of the world actually isn't part of the UN.
So
Just like, sorry.
if I can just jump in, obviously on the UN, we've been in a lot of UNs, we've been in and out of them, replaced.
Yeah.
How exactly would you ensure that the UN we would go into would be useful and beneficial to the general public? Because, well, it may benefit things like the military, but how do the public benefit? How will you make sure they can benefit from being in a UN?
To be frank, whether we're in a UN or not, the government, for the public, they won't notice. Doesn't make a difference. The only difference it makes is for the Security Council. If you look at the grand scheme of things, whilst yes, I do think it's important we're in a UN. The general public, you wouldn't notice, to be frank. However, as I said, we would be hosting events. Like with the other countries.
Right. going on to that, obviously,
That is exactly my point. I don't know if you were listening to what I said, but I actually did mention sporting events and motorsport. That was the well, we might actually get to bring it home for once, for the first time in how many years, which would be nice. Bloody
Anyways,
Spain.
as the former secretary for like 5 governments, I'd like to point out how are you guys, because I'm sitting in Parliament, how are you guys going to handle the planning with Metropolitan Police Service? Because trust me, they're gonna be a censored words about your planning. So how are you going to do that?
By being clear and consistent and actually doing what we say we will. Obviously, the Metropolitan Police are responsible for security. We will do exactly as they say and advise on any security measures which they wish to be in place. We will give them ample time and warning before any events take place to allow them to prepare and put procedures in place. And if they say it is not safe, the event will not take place. Simple.
alright. Any other responses? So, moving on,
Well, Labour, while we're talking about the Met, I would like to ask you, how are you going to ensure that the Metropolitan Police can guarantee freedom of movement in such case? Like, you're saying like we need good employment in command, but that also means like we need more people for the police, of course, but also mostly in protection command, so we can give our diplomats, such as yourself, soon. Um, well, diplomats not per se, but members of parliament, government, etc., more freedom of movement. Because right now, I can assure that our monarch here that is sitting in the public would love to go out to the Red Lion. So how are you going to ensure that the Metropolitan Police is staffed enough to actually perform such duties?
DJ, do you not think that it's important we protect the British people as well as government ministers? Because obviously you've just said that you want basically everyone in the Met to be in the protection command.
Well,
However, do you
that's
not...
not what I'm saying. I'm
Oh,
saying
did I
like
misinterpret it?
we need more personnel in protection command for our diplomats, but I also mean like we also need more constables,
That's true.
like itself, more frontline policing. Right now,
Yeah.
if you're going on London, you'll see most of the time protection command or
Yeah,
specialist
definitely.
firing command.
Well, everything starts with intelligence and frontline policing, really, doesn't it? Because if you can get that down, you can prevent a lot of... Prevention is massive when it comes to security. We work with our security advisor, actually, to help the Met prevent a lot of incidents. Can I add, we would ensure that at every one of our mentioned sporting events, there would be Metropolitan Police, British Armed Forces advertisements. So we can push it out to as many people as possible.
that takes us quite nicely into one of the next questions, which was how, if you do get voted in, how are you going to ensure the country and public's security while balancing spending on things such as defence, the police, with other priorities?
You can't do anything if you don't have a safe and secure country. That needs to be your number one aim, is to have safety and security for everybody. Because you can't have any events without safety and security, it will turn into chaos. We would ensure that there is adequate funding for the intelligence agencies to prevent attacks before they happen, as well as obviously advertising the Met for new applications, sponsoring the Met, greater funding for the Met. We wish to increase Met funding by 50 to 60% within the first week or two of a potential reform government. This increased funding will bring technology to the Met and make it more appealing for people to apply. Because if people like the look of it, they're more likely to join it, aren't they? If you see a nice fancy BMW driving past, you'll think, oh, I want to go in that. And then you'll attract people. Once you've got the people attracted, you can train them, and that's how you grow. Really.
If I may ask, is my mic? Yeah, okay. So basically, we're talking about the Metropolitan Police being the front line. I've been the Foreign Secretary, so I know all the details about MI6, MI5, etc. But meanwhile, we also need to consider how are they going to connect with Metropolitan Police on giving them the proper information, because I can tell you that has not been happening for the past 3 terms.
I'm also aware of that from internal sources. Whilst I don't think it'd be wise to discuss all of our security measures in a publicly broadcast meeting, that would just be foolish.
Of course.
Want to add, we would create systems of transferring intelligence and information between the relevant public service bodies, such as, I'm not sure if you're aware, but in real life in England we have something called the Counterterrorism Counterterrorism Police, which is a board chaired by the Metropolitan Police, and that's where they discuss and respond to any incidents.
Of course. Who would be on this board, so be precise for the people that don't know what it is?
So on this board you'd have, it's chaired by the Met, and on it you have officers from various specialties. So you'll have an advisor from MI5, MI6, and counterterrorism policing, which would be the counterterrorism firearms, and also counterterrorism intelligence, which the Met also perform. These people would all come together on this board, discuss ideas and how we will respond to potential threats.
Alright, but basically for example MI5 and MI6, they need to get a public advisor, basically, because otherwise their identity won't be revealed as working for an intelligence agency.
These are completely confident. No, everybody within the meeting is the same confidentiality. So whilst yes, that is an issue, that is a relevant issue. We could also work with MI5 and MI6 to see how they want to transfer the evidence. Remember, in this debate, none of us have spoke with MI5 or MI6 about this yet. So consulting them would be the main focus of us. This is just a draft.
If we can just move on
Of
to
course.
Labour and Better Britons, give them a chance to get their points in.
Apollo, I've got here a member of parliament, sorry, not a member of parliament, a member of the public that has mentioned to me that, they asked me if you could do a public Q&A.
There will be a public Q&A once we go over, I believe there is 3 more questions, and then we'll be opening it up to the public, and we'll invite select few up to answer questions.
Alright, thank you.
So if we can get through the last 2-3 questions, then we'll open it up to the public, who will be welcome to come up. So obviously the big thing, one of the main ones, is the electoral form. Do you support any changes to the way the elections are handled? If so, what changes are you looking at and why? We'll start off with Labour. Yep, the floor is yours, Labour. And why do you feel that it's not fit for purpose? But if I can, correct me if I'm wrong, isn't the point of the government to have a majority in Parliament? And obviously, do you feel that so if I can, our current electoral system, and I'm sure someone from the Electoral Commission can correct me if I'm wrong, is based on the real life method of it, where it is the responsibility of the parties, if they want to be in government, to get the seats in the House by putting forward candidates. Otherwise, you're not really voting for the people. We're not really a small UK. The last election we had 13 seats open, and pretty much all of them, bar 1 or 2, got filled. So, as Bearbrand Party, just because we aren't at 1,000 members, it doesn't mean we can't have our parliament ran in a way that is realistic. Would any of the other parties like to comment on the topic?
If I may be so blunt, if you want to get the electoral reform, just propose it in Parliament.
Anything? There we go. Right, reform, anything you want to add in?
Sorry, I missed the question.
We're currently
had a bit of
about any electoral changes that you'd want to bring in to help improve the process.
I think the way people choose their constituencies, we can't really do anything about, since we are only technically Westminster. We couldn't hold votes for MPs. So the way we do it is the only real way a government can both get a majority and have a fair election. Whilst yes, we could let everybody vote for a PM separately to a party, that wouldn't work because you need a majority. If you don't have a majority in the government, you will never get any of your policies or propositions through, as the opposition will just say no, just because they can, basically. It's not fair.
So are you agreeing with Labour's opinion?
No,
Labour's stance? So you're
no. I think that the system we have now is the best we can do given the limitations of Roblox.
Of fairness, I've been in Mod UK before where we had that exact situation. Like, we had a government elected just then we had the state opening of parliament with the King's Speech. With enough people in the opposition, we can just say, okay, bye-bye King's Speech, and following that, our party got elected. So, you know what I'm going with this. It will be, like, unfair.
If we can let Labour, anything you want to counter any of the points that the others have made?
Sorry, did Better Britain just say they performed?
Well, this is going to be interesting. Just heard information from the electoral that there might be a Liberal Democrat.
Bit
Let's
late
have
for
most.
that, isn't it?
Oh,
Yeah, it's a bit late, but oh well, I don't care.
and one of our final, well, two of our final questions, they basically coincide with each other before we move to the public Q&A. Obviously, a big thing is freedom of speech and obviously human rights. How would you ensure that free speech is both protected but also preventing hate speech and misinformation? And through that, how will you ensure that agencies such as the news agencies such as ITV, the BBC, Sky News will be able to have free and fair press? Labour? And Roblox once again gracing us with its...
I know, right? Well, that's interesting to say, but
These are obviously quite serious things that you're saying here. Like, but how does it relate to ensuring people have free speech and free press? You're still not answering the question, Labour. If I can get in, how will you balance the protect people's right to free speech and prevent hate speech?
Would you
well,
like
I do.
us to fill in what he's typing?
Labour, would you be okay if someone else? Oh, okay. Okay, can we please get back on topic, Labour? If you've
Can,
got nothing else to say, we're going to have to move on to one of the other candidates. Then please stay on topic and don't deviate again, or we will be moving on. Right, opening up to the floor. Any other parties wish to comment on any of Labour's point or the original question?
Well,
Sorry, go on, DJ.
alright. Well, for starters, we got the freedom of information speech, which, if we're going to be honest, hasn't been used at all. Like, every department and ministry should keep an archive of pretty much any information they got. Further on, I can agree with Labour. We should make a law that pretty much states that news agencies, but also our general public, has freedom of speech, but also making sure that that doesn't involve hate crimes. Yeah, I believe that's it. You can speak, Morgan.
So I'd like to say, obviously, Labour. There's only one correct answer, really, which Labour and the Independent have hit right on the head. Free speech is vital. Everybody's entitled to an opinion, and I think we need to protect that through laws. I'd also like to add, hate speech, hate crimes, completely different from free speech. They are quite clearly their own thing. We would also have to define them clearly in legislation, which is the only way we can defer them from non-hate crimes. Otherwise, we will have the issue of people claiming their free speech has been broken, as there's no clear definition of what they can and can't do. However, if we create legislation which identifies hate crimes and hate speeches, which will pass, give people a better idea, if you know what I mean.
All right. And I think we'll move on to the public questions from a member in the audience. Flebsy Fan 100 asks, what are you going to do about the amount of MPS and firearms command? Not exactly sure what.
So what he's on about, from as far as I'm aware, is most of the Metropolitan Police are actually counter-terrorism firearms officers who are supposed to be essentially the elite, if you will. However, I am aware that the Pisky, the firearms commander for the Metropolitan Police, is working with the Assistant Commissioner of Met Operations, who are responsible for the specialist assets of the Met, to change this. They are restructuring how Met Firearms works, so we will not have the numbers of CTSFO we have currently. You will see people more as ARV officers. I think that answers your question. The Met are already doing that, or in the process of. Oh, you're on about Met as a whole being firearms.
If we're being realistic, though, I can understand why there are so many firearms, because, like,
I'm gonna say most of the crime is only able to respond to with a firearms officer. Really, you're not gonna send an unarmed or a taser officer to someone with a firearm,
very
which
much.
is what we see on
Which,
London.
I'm not going to speak as a politician right now, but as a developer,
No, of course.
we're currently working on adding more, well, United Kingdom-based weaponry, so it's knives and just regular pistols, and that probably means we're gonna have to look into reviewing the automatics and, like, that's kind of rifles, but
If I
yeah,
can
that's
just
just
interject
development points.
on the Labour's point, when you see government officials, usually government officials are protected by royalty and specialist protection, whereas PADP are mainly more building security for things like the Houses of Parliament and that.
And protecting the members of parliament, if I'm not
How
mistaken.
would you encourage people to join PADP? This will be the last point on the answer on the previous question, as we do have other ones. Alright. Moving on. Our next question comes from Valerie, who asks, what are you going to do about implementing a public transport system? So, from this I can assume they're talking about something like Transport for London.
So
we recently passed a bill regarding Transport of London, but that will need to be supported development-wise. I presume we're going to include buses then?
So Reform will introduce a public transport fund, which would essentially allow public transport services such as Transport for London, as you mentioned, who manage buses and taxi services around London, who have something they can use to actually get started and purchase technology and equipment required. So, for example, a bus or a taxi, because without that, you're not going to have public transport.
Well, obviously, speaking as a developer, we need to have a look where we're going to throw the Transport of London and these buses.
Also, everyone's against trains.
The Labour member put a point up. When you say funding for these things, do you want to elaborate on what you mean by that?
Real money, which we will use to fund small businesses. We will set up a system where businesses can request Reform to help them fund development assets, which we would essentially buy them equipment which they require. As a grant kind of thing is the only way. I think the proper term would be grant. No, it's nothing to do with development. If you actually look at the government in real life, most of their work within transport is done through grants. So road networks, there's a lot of grants for cycle lanes at the minute, which is the government doing that. Also, public transport, there's grants for public transport, which is the government funding the money. We will not be developing for any businesses, as we are not developers, we are politicians. We will instead be issuing grants and funding for small businesses.
To clarify, Morgan is a armed forces developer. He doesn't do any main group stuff.
Yeah, I'm also not a developer for the main group, so that point is completely irrelevant.
Alright, another good question in debate session. The next question again comes from Valerie. How will you ensure that political parties have more transparency towards the public? Better Brown Party, let's start with you if you've got anything on that.
Didn't we have legislation on that?
How will your party ensure that you're transparent to the public?
Yeah.
If you need some time to type something up, feel free just to say.
So, did I miss something? It kicked me out of the chat.
Bear Brand Party is just answering a question from the
perfect.
public.
Okay, that's fine.
If you want Bear Bren Parry, we can give you some time to get something typed up that you can use that won't be filtered by Roblox's annoying filter. Alright, and we can either
BBP, that is nice, but isn't the job of like also the government to release weekly press releases on their what's it called, progress of the past week? So basically, when you are in the government, won't it normally be like that you update once a week to the public, like, oh, we've done this in defense, or we have done that in the foreign office, or that kind of stuff? Like, what would your party do in this scenario to? im-
He's not asking what you did do, he's asking what you will do or would do. Speaking in the future tense. You're not running for government. You are aware this is a debate for Parliament, don't you? I'm very confused now.
Bren Parry, if we can, and Labour, if we can ask you keep things on topic and don't go off topic, thank you.
Better Britain, he's asking, so obviously, as I'm sure you're aware, once a week the Prime Minister will release a press briefing to tell everybody what the government has achieved. He is saying, what will you do in a similar kind of fashion? Was his question.
Right, just so you know, we are on a time limit here, so if we can wrap up, make sure everyone gets a say before we move on. Just so our audience knows, the next question will be the final question that is answered, and the final question, if everyone is ready, is what are your plans to reduce corruption within agencies such as the British Armed Forces, SIS, NCA, things like that?
Well, this all really starts with transparency, doesn't it? Oh, sorry. Go on, Labour. We'll let you take it.
Alex, if I may ask, while you're talking about the Defense Council and the Secretary of State for Defense, um, uh, so basically that's gonna keep them accountable. But what will be the barrier between the Defense Council and the Secretary of State for Defense, so the Defense Council can actually do their job instead of constantly having government interference? All right, and how are you going to achieve that? All right.
Alright, I think we'll move on to final closing statements. So we'll just let you finish up, Labour, and then we'll start with you. So, Labour, if you want to give your final closing statement before we finish.
I'd like the question.
Alright. Thank you, Labour, for coming. And moving on to the Better Britain Party, any of your final closing statements? Alright, nice and short. And DJ, any closing statements you want to, or points you want to say? I'm taking that as a no. Alright. And finally, Morgan, any closings?
Yeah, so just say thank you to obviously Alex from Labour for providing a good debate, a DJ for also from the Independent for providing a good debate, Better Britain, not sure why you came.
That's just rude.
Let's be a bit respectful, please.
No, genuinely, because they're not actually running for government. We'd also like to say we are the voice of the British people. We will deliver on our promises. We will provide a competent government, and we will do what everything we promise, unlike previous years. God save the king.
All right. Give me 1 sec. We just get this finished.
Well, I guess the Labour and the BBP are gonna continue debating of.
I'm just gonna sit here and watch this.
Yeah, I know, right? Let's grab the popcorn.
Got some popcorn, have we, DJ? Come on.
Yeah, of course. Here, take some
Oh,
popcorn.
cheers, mate. Thank you.
Okay, so if our speakers just want to mute, we'll finish off this segment. We thank you, everyone, for showing up. And we hope to do a couple more of these covering the election itself.
Yum, yum, yum.